Today is day 12, and I think I'm just gonna go off script. I'm gonna try my best to come up with a concrete topic today, and the one I had in mind was this idea of not rushing. So, a few years ago, I heard that you should never run for the train. I took that to heart. I started to slowly shift into slowing down a little bit more and not rushing through my day. It's really interesting to see simply how much we rush when we just take a moment to slow down a little bit or try and challenge ourselves to do something just a little bit slower than what we would normally do. One of the things that's very challenging for me is to talk slowly. I often get very excited and want to communicate my point. Another thing I've noticed, I've sped through in my life from talking to walking extremely fast. If you've spent any time living in New York, you know that you need to walk quickly. So, walking fast, brushing my teeth super fast, trying to just wolf down lunch really quickly, not even really tasting my food, just eating simply to get it over with, to check a box. And we don't slow down, we miss so much of what makes life wonderful and also what makes life challenging. When we rush, we can gloss over the things that we do need to pay attention to, the suffering that we need to witness, the actions that we need to take. And in this interest of not running for the train, if you're outside and just on a walk, what can you do to reduce the amount of input or reduce the speed at which you might be consuming the content that you're taking part in or the speed at which you're traveling? I know coming from the tech world, it's very common for people to review a recorded meeting and review it on 1 to 1.5 to 2x speed. And that makes sense. You do only have a limited amount of time. But when we speed everything up, how much are we actually retaining? And especially when we're multitasking, how much are we actually retaining? There's some interesting research around multitasking that indicates that none of us are good at multitasking and that we actually pay a penalty, or our brain does, in the performance quality every time we switch from one task to another. When we slow down with intention, what becomes available to us? What do we start to notice? And now I know this from spending a lot of time in nature, and there is a lot that nature has to teach us simply by being observant. There's nothing we actively have to do. We just need to sit and notice. And something really interesting happens, which is that, especially if you feel like your world is pretty flat right now, spending more time outside where your senses are engaged, where you're making the choice to reduce some of the time pressure. And that might mean tucking your phone away, even for 15 minutes, just making a commitment to yourself that really no one's going to need you in that time period. If something is an actual emergency, then you can address it then. But giving yourself the permission to take a little bit of time and simply be in a space and notice what's happening. And eventually you start to notice that you're not separate from nature, that you are an active part of it. You're a part of this bigger universe. And you're not alone anymore. Like I've said in a past video, everyone's a stranger until they're your friend. And I think the same goes for the wildlife that inhabit our shared ecosystems. Start to recognize things about certain trees or certain plants that flower around a regular time of year. You notice that maybe the ants are only active during this time of day, or certain birds are only out in the morning. And it feels a lot less isolating. And I know we have major hills to climb when it comes to reestablishing and building bridges in regards to human connection. I think at the same time, we can build that bridge to the environment that we're in by slowing down and noticing and being a little bit more present in the spaces that we're in. You don't have to make a million friends overnight or make a massive change overnight. In fact, I would not recommend that you do that. It's probably not going to stick. Instead, working for the micro impact daily and something that is consistent. So a little bit of observation goes a long way. For example, maybe it's the difference between you rushing through the train station, passing by someone who is also overwhelmed, but maybe just dropped their hat and gloves and they didn't notice, but you're steaming right by with your headphones in and you don't notice and no one else notices and that person goes on their way. And now I'm not saying you have to stop and pick up everything someone else drops. Oftentimes there are also other people who are observant, but allowing, just testing to see what it's like to take 5 minutes without trying to rush through something to avoid the experience that you're in and just witness the experience that you're having. And I know that doesn't sound very pleasant when it's like, oh, how can I practice not rushing and observing in Penn Station at rush hour? That might not be the most pleasant place to be present. But instead, you could maybe go for a walk on the weekend and leave your headphones at home and notice how fast you're walking around the park. Are you moving at a super fast clip? Are you an F1 driver? Or are you a human being who's enjoying their afternoon and really soaking it in? And when you spend more time soaking it in, you realize just simply how beautiful everything is. And I'd ask you to pay attention to the difference you feel in your body when you rush versus when you don't. I know there can be a lot of anxiety that comes up around slowing down, especially if you have a sense of time pressure or you know that you have to be somewhere at some place at some time. And maybe in the past you don't give yourself credit for being able to self-manage. And so it becomes hard to arrive at places on time for a variety of different reasons and all the many things you're juggling as a human being. But just try and see with things that are low stakes, how it might feel to just slow down a little bit. Maybe take the time to leisurely sit down and drink your coffee instead of taking it to go. Would that extra 15 minutes really completely crush your day? Where can you find those pockets of time? And what's interesting, and I'm glad I'm talking about it now, is there's this something happens when you are not in a rush to everyone else that you're around. And that energy of not being rushed helps other people to relax. And it's a subtle thing. And it's not going to happen with, if you're in a group of all type A friends who are all used to rushing and hustling, and you're the one person who's starting to slow down a little bit more with intention. You may notice that some people can be frustrated by it. But I think as long as it's not malicious in terms of, oh, I'm not considering any needs at all or any of the pre-established timelines. Instead, it's with a positive intent around, I'm just paying a little bit more attention to what's going on in my life, and I'm paying a little bit more attention to where my energy is going. I think people really do appreciate that, because what are What's the rush? What are we rushing for? Rush to hurry up and die? Rush to achieve that big thing? Everything in life is the satisfaction around the journey of every day that we live. And even though those days sometimes can be very difficult, and sometimes it's not just a difficult day, it's a very difficult month and very difficult years. And there's no getting around that with the exception of a perspective shift. There's no getting around it. So, all this to say, I invite you to take a few deep breaths, see where you can wedge just a little bit of time into your day that you're taking back for you, where you're not rushing at all, walking a little bit slower to the elevator, walking across your kitchen a little bit slower, and just notice how you feel and the difference between autopilot and intention. Thanks for watching, and I'm wishing you a whole lot of peace and relaxation. I think everyone out here is working really hard just to figure out how to navigate life as a human being on Earth. So, regardless what it is you're dealing with, I wish you well, and I hope that you can find some moments for rest too. Take care.